Hello everyone, we have been talking about eSIM and today we have Detlef Balks, eSIM expert from achelos, and we are going to talk about more about the eSIM provisioning softwares. In our previous white papers, we have highlighted that the off-the-shelf provisioning software among eSIM RSP software is rising, and today we are going to delve more on this topic. But why eSIM? The adoption of eSIM across consumer and IoT applications is growing and is soon expected to reach an inflection point. The number of operators who enable eSIM capability is growing every day. Just in 2023 alone, we have seen more than 100 new operators adding eSIM support. In fact, there are some operators, some digital first MVNOs who are completely eSIM only. All this is made possible by eSIM management solution vendors and service providers who enable mobile operators to connect eSIM capable devices to the networks. Today, we have Detlef Balks, who is an expert on this topic, and we are going to pick his brains and let us know what this is all about and how achelos is doing in this space. Welcome, Detlef. How are you doing?
Thank you, Ankit, for inviting me. I'm doing very well. Hope you too. And it's wonderful talking to you today.
Great. So, Detlef, we all know about achelos. During our market studies, we have seen that achelos is one of the leading providers in the eSIM RSP space. So, you have clearly succeeded in establishing achelos in the market. So, could you please explain a few words what achelos does, what are your products, and what is your portfolio look like?
Certainly. We are a software development company, and we focus on two specific areas. One is the development of standard solutions for remote eSIM provisioning and management, as defined by the GSMA, which, as you know, is the Association of Mobile Network Operators and the wider mobile ecosystem. And our second focus at achelos is the development of bespoke solutions for customers within the eSIM technology domain, and where they seek a system that matches some unique requirements that can't be fulfilled with an off-the-shelf product.
Right. But why do we need an off-shelf product? As far as I am concerned and what I know, eSIM standards have been around for quite some time, right? And so do you cover all the different segments and standards from GSMA?
Yes, we do. The initial standard for M2M, so machine to machine, was published in 2013. And so when we started 2 years later in 2015, this was also the basis for our first software solution. Now, in terms of technology, the M2M standard is somewhat outdated. For example, it uses SMS, and that's quite incompatible with modern requirements of IoT devices. And furthermore, the standard is highly operator-centric and not focused at all really on the IoT enterprises, which created a lot of business contradictions. Nonetheless, there is a substantial amount of devices and deployments in the market. So this technology is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yes, definitely. I mean, eSIM for IoT makes a lot of sense. But there is a bigger consumer market as well, which is, as you know, is addressed by the DP Plus solution, which is most referred to when most people when talk about eSIM because they're talking about operators because eSIM like smartphones is one of the most first connecting ways for the consumer. So most people bring up DP Plus. So how does that work in terms of DP Plus? Can you support that as well?
Indeed. Managing eSIM for consumer devices, as you said, smartphones, smartwatches, and further devices down the line has undoubtedly been driving the technology forward for the last couple of years, really. And as you are well aware, Apple, Samsung, and pretty much every other device manufacturer are equipping their premium devices, but also starting with their medium range devices with eSIM chips. And this has created over the years the critical mass that was required for operators to seriously consider eSIM as an alternative to the SIM card.
Correct. And we have been hearing, I think for a long time, IoT and consumer were two different words almost. But during last 1.5 years, we have been hearing the eSIM IoT consumer spec, the SGP32. So this and the term that we hear about it is the EIM, the eSIM Remote IoT Manager, which is using the DP Plus solution in IoT devices. So how does this fit into the picture?
Uh, Very true. This is creating a lot of excitement in the industry right now because it promises to solve a number of problems we've seen with the M2M standard over the years. First of all, the proven DP Plus of the consumer solution will be used for profile provisioning. And the DP Plus is an open system that is able to communicate with all kind of devices without the devices being pre-registered in any way to the DP Plus. And second, because in IoT, you usually don't have a user, of course, managing the device as in the consumer space. And so a new component was needed. And that is the EIM, the eSIM Remote IoT Manager. So the related specification, as you said, SGP 32 was released by GSMA only last year. And it will deliver a very flexible solution for the remote connectivity management of all kinds of IoT devices, but especially the highly constrained devices with limited battery capacity and processing power.
Right, and it makes a lot of sense because, as you said, the IoT devices more often than not do not have a controller on this side. Unlike smartphones, smartwatches, I can configure an eSIM on my smartphone very easily. But I mean, if there's a human on the IoT side, that I don't think then we need IoT then. So yeah, that's the case. So I just had one more question. Exactly, I mean, how these devices where the battery must last maybe 5 years or more represent a very large share of the device market, and eSIM is defined in the M2M standard did not work for them. When we talk to device manufacturers, we also get the feedback that iSIM is seen as potential game changer for the same reasons you just mentioned: energy, space efficiency, low cost, low power. Do you also support this technology with your solutions?
ISIM, which is in fact a term which stands for integrated eSIM, is a really hot topic, no doubt about that. But its impact, as you said, is mainly on the device side, not the software backend. You see, eSIM functionality as such can be delivered in different form factors. Best known up to now is the dedicated chip that is then embedded into a device. In other scenarios, the eSIM chip can also be embedded in a plastic card body like the standard SIM card, and then you can insert it into the SIM slot of a device, which might still be there as long as the device is supporting eSIM functionality. And with iSIM, then the chip is integrated into a trusted area of the main processor, and that results in these substantial savings of energy and physical footprint, which makes it ideal for the use in low power networks. So, however, iSIM is simply a form factor, and that can be managed by our software in the same way as any other eSIM form factor.
Right. Now, I would like to ask a few questions more about achelos. As you know, we have the senior eSIM expert from achelos. So, all the viewers who want to know more about achelos, we have the perfect person to learn from. Analyzing the eSIM market that we have been doing for the last few years, we have seen quite a different types of models on the eSIM management service, some for the hardware of devices, others over the top services, or sometimes even a combination of the two. Now we have this talk of off the shelf eSIM provisioning, eSIM management. So in that space, how is Achelos positioning itself? What sets you apart?
In principle, we see ourselves to belong in the category of eSIM provisioning and management software. And within this segment, we think that the major differentiator is the fact that we deliver the software that is required to operate an eSIM management service. But we ourselves as achelos do not offer the actual service.
Right. I get it because I have been studying, and as with Counterpoint, we have been looking at this market for years. But some of the viewers who are not from this industry, they might get confused, like delivering the software but not delivering the service. So it would really help you if you can give us an example and tell us why this is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it can be indeed confusing, and we try to clarify this position and to communicate this position very clearly into the market. So let's take a telco service provider or a solution provider. And this provider wants to add eSIM services to an existing solution stack. And here, as you can imagine, it's quite difficult when you source this service from a company that also provides the same or highly similar services to the same market. So using our software solutions for hosting your own eSIM service gives our customers full control over all technical, commercial, as well as operational aspects of the service.
Right. And I can see the benefit in this approach for a service provider. But what about mobile operators, especially big mobile operators who have millions of connections? Since you don't offer the eSIM service, I guess they are not a market for achelos. They're not a target customers. Or can you help those mobile operators as well?
True. Nearly all MNOs are onboarding eSIM-as-a-Service when they start to support eSIM. And this makes a lot of sense to them, especially while the number of profile downloads are low, as they have been for a couple of years now. But as adoption of eSIM is growing, there can be several important incentives to host your own eSIM service, even for an operator. Probably not the majority for them, but for a number of them. And let me give you some examples. It can be national regulation regarding data sovereignty. It can be a requirement to add in-network redundancies, or on a operator group level, once the members have onboarded eSIM services from different providers, there can be strong incentives to harmonize the eSIM service with a group-wide solution for all group members. So we expect this market to grow quite a bit over the coming years.
Right. And you mentioned national regulation, right? I come from India, and in India, it's a prime example of national regulation where all the operators are required to host their own eSIM service. And we can see that all the three operators, the three big operators here, have their own GSMA SAS-SM certification, which brings me to my next question, the SAS-SM certification. So we hear that SAS certification is quite compulsory for an operator to start an eSIM service. So can you tell us more about it, the service, how it works, and can you please explain it a bit for our audience?
SAS, or Security Assurance Scheme, which is what it stands for, comes originally from the world of SIM manufacturing. And that was meant to assure the GSMA operator members that their SIM suppliers comply with a certain security level. Nowadays, with eSIM, we have two components really. One is the hardware, the eSIM chip, and that still requires production and a secure manufacturing facility and is then sent off to a device manufacturer where the chip is embedded. However, the second component is the eSIM profile, digital asset, and GSMA has extended the SAS scheme for subscription management in order to ensure that eSIM management services are as secure as the hardware production of the eSIM chip.
Right. So a company must have this certification before it's able to run the eSIM management service. Is that correct?
Correct. And like other security schemes, and for example, ISO 20001, probably the best known one, SAS certification requires also an audit that is performed by external accredited auditors. And during the audit, the policies and related procedures of a company, but also certain physical security measures, are verified against a defined set of requirements, and that makes SAS as a procedure rather complex.
Now coming back to achelos, Detlef, I must ask you, is achelos certified as well to supply this service?
That's a question we do hear quite a lot, because people see that we are offering a solution in the eSIM space. And often the second question is exactly that: are we certified? And the answer to that is we provide software. And with the GSMA test specification, we prove that our solutions are fully compliant in terms of functionality. SAS, on the other hand, is about the service operation. It's not about the software. Therefore, we are also not listed as a certified service provider, but of course, our software runs a number of certified services. Nonetheless, we take a rather active role with regards to SAS certification and are quite involved in this space. Achelos can help a lot to ensure that the security audit and the certification process is achieved in the most efficient way. For example, we explain how the process works and what a customer needs to do to get to the expected level of compliance.
Right. So, as you know, with any network, any connection, especially at a public scale or at an enterprise scale, security is not an optional subject. It's a very essential. And of course, with eSIM connecting most of the devices these days, security must be at the heart of the eSIM service as well. So, if I were to host an eSIM service, what does that all mean in practice? How can I ensure security for my devices, my connection, for my data? How would I be doing that?
Yes, let's take a look at the details of the service itself. So an eSIM solution consists basically of three key components, which is the eSIM software, the database, and the hardware security module, the so-called HSM. All components must then be logically and physically protected. Therefore, choosing the right location for the physical infrastructure is the very first step when you want to build up such a service. Now, the infrastructure can be on-prem, you can use co-location data center for it, or a public cloud service provider that probably already has certified data centers under SAS. And you can also use a mix of these options in a hybrid deployment model.
Correct. But let me stop you for a moment. You mentioned HSM. What exactly is HSM?
An HSM is a purpose-built tamper-resistant device that secures cryptographic processes like key generation, key storage, data encryption and decryption, and also creation and validation of digital signatures and certificates.
Correct. And how is HSM related to the SAS security certification that we just talked about?
Yeah, the security requirements of SAS demand the use of a hardware security module. So it's not optional, it's mandatory when you want to host an eSIM service. And furthermore, SAS defines then a number of physical security measures that protect the actual access to the device. So you have to look at it from a logical perspective as well as from a physical perspective.
Right. And I believe this can be quite a challenge for some companies, especially companies who are not that proficient in security, like many enterprises who might be handling some drones or who might be having an asset tracking company might not be aware of how to deliver that security. So it can be quite challenging. So how would you ensure as Achelos to ensure security with related to connectivity and with eSIM?
Yes, it can be a challenge. And we actually noticed that even the large public cloud providers like Microsoft Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud, they find it difficult to offer attractive solutions in this space. Why is that? Well, this is because an HSM can't be a virtual asset that is shared across several tenants. Um, and that's the business model of a cloud provider. An HSM for RSP must be a dedicated machine. Each service requires its own HSM hardware. And based on these difficulties to implement HSM in the service, we have now worked with a partner to make this quite complex part of the eSIM service much easier to navigate for those companies that want to host a service. And so we're really excited that a true HSM-as-a-Service becomes available from Utimaco, which is one of the leading HSM manufacturers in the world. And this service includes dedicated HSM hardware, which is hosted at Utimaco's certified data centers, and you have 24/7 access to Utimaco's expert support staff. So overall, this service, in our view, remarkably simplifies hosting of an eSIM service, not only when you build a new one, even to migrate when you run existing services, because it reduces capital expenditure considerably.
I see the HSM really is a very important part of the overall solution. Some might even call it the heart of the solution, correct? But how do we integrate, especially as you mentioned, Ultimaco has their data centers in one location, and as you has told us, HSM must be a machine, right? So how is it integrated with the other components like achelos software, for example? How can you tell us how it is integrated with all the other components?
Yeah, if we take a very high level view on the architecture of an eSIM service, so the principal layout of the eSIM service infrastructure will always be quite similar. You will have on the one hand side a secure network for the application, and access to this network is only possible through a so-called DMZ or demilitarized zone. Now, this DMZ is deployed in between firewalls that screen all inbound traffic and is restricting remote access to the eSIM service resources, which are located in the secure network. And finally, you can even have a third firewall to specifically then protect access to the HSM. So what you said, the HSM really can be seen as being the heart of the overall operation and the eSIM service.
Now, this sounds quite similar to the kind of infrastructure many companies already deploy to secure their internal resources. Am I right there?
Yes, you are. DMZ is a well-established concept and best practice to secure internal sensitive data. But of course, the actual implementation itself differs for each customer, and it also depends where it is going to be deployed, whether in public or private cloud, and which software components and utilities are preferred by the customer. And I think here as achelos, we can add a lot of value. You see, we're not just a software provider that is delivering GSMA-compliant software, although this is really our core business. But what we bring to the table is the knowledge, the experience, and the partner network to build such a service in an effective way that meets by design all the requirements from the SAS security scheme.
So I know that this software can be deployed in a public or a private cloud depending on customer's preference. So from your perspective as a service provider, what do you recommend? Or even do you recommend a specific model of deployment?
Well, clearly, overall, the industry is moving towards public cloud, and that for many reasons: scalability, reliability, service continuity, and so forth. However, what we do see is sometimes use cases where private cloud, even on-prem, can be the more suitable solution. For example, to utilize existing infrastructure, or because the use case might be rather limited, not so much like for mobile operator, but for example, when we talk about private networks. And this, by the way, we see as one of the next upcoming markets. For our software, in the end, it doesn't really matter. When we started in 2015, our objective was to develop modern software with a microservices-based architecture that can be deployed in any containerized environment, and that would not require any change of code whatsoever.
Thank you, Detlef. And it looks like what you started developing in 2015 is really succeeding because of the success that you have achieved in the ecosystem. So, must thank you for that, and also thank you for coming to this video interview. Thank you, Detlef. I think this video will help us to explain the eSIM process and how an eSIM service is built, and all the components that go into building the eSIM service. So, but before we go to a close, I will ask one more question. Where do you see eSIM moving? Where do you see eSIM going in the next 1 year? And what is the outlook for achelos for this technology?
Well, yeah, we think that eSIM only has started really, and we see it is speeding up now because a number of things had to be done first to make it a success outside the actual technology standards. For example, in consumer devices, a lot of work was required to improve the user experience. things like eSIM transfer between devices that now have become available from iOS and Android, they were really essential. And in IoT, as we just talked about, SGP32 with the introduction of the EIM and in combination with the concept of an integrated eSIM into the main processor really promises to pave the way for much needed efficiency that will allow deployments at scale. And in the long term, we expect eSIM to find its way into any connected device, and most likely even multiple eSIMs for some devices like cars, robots, drones, so all kinds of future use cases which are about to be launched or actually have launched already. So in our view from achelos, we believe there is indeed a very interesting journey ahead of us, as well as for the entire ecosystem.
That's quite a big outlook, Detlef, and I will agree with you too as well. In our market studies, we are also expecting billions of eSIM capable devices to be shipped in this decade. Although eSIM start has been a little slow, but is now approaching this inflection point, and we see it really taking off. It was great talking to you, Detlef,
Thanks for having me, Ankit. It was a real pleasure talking with you today. Take care. Bye bye.
and thanks to our audience for listening. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. And thanks to you, Detlef.